Hi, everyone. My name is Yasaman, and I am the Executive Director of the Afghan-Americans. Came together to create a space to support Afghan-American women. We weren't sure exactly what this was going to look like, but we did know that we were all really passionate about this cause and knew that something unique and special was going to come out of it. Through conversations, hosting different types of events, asking around in our community about their needs and their wants, we decided to create AAWC. So what is our vision? Our vision for AAWC is to empower, connect, and support Afghan-American women. Our mission is to provide resources through education, networking, and community building to empower Afghan-American women in achieving career and personal success. With that, one of the resources that we identified were spaces for Afghan-American women to have these discussions. So these could be about, these discussions could be networking opportunities, these could be safe spaces, discussion boards, and finally, live panels. So the idea here is to have conversations about topics that involve Afghan-American women. So whether this be issues that we face at home or at work, as a community, things that happen in the news, we believe it's important to showcase our voices and hopefully get to a point where we can have these conversations as a community. That being said, the topic for tonight is about sisterhood. We think this is an appropriate topic to have for our first live discussion, since sisterhood is what brought the six of us together. That being said, I'll have the rest of the panel, which is also the rest of AAWC board, introduce themselves, and we'll start off with Mina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mina. I'm the Engagement and Networking Chair for AAWC. I currently live in San Francisco, and I grew up with four boys. I don't have any sisters, and a lot of my cousins that I grew up with here, they're either like 10 years older than me or 10 years younger than me. So sisterhood has definitely been an important part of my life that I've been looking for. So that's why AAWC is such an important part. And that's why this conversation, I think, is so relevant and important to me as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samaya. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a mom and a wife and a sister. Sisterhood, something really important to me. Obviously, one of the main motivations of wanting to join AAWC and really creating the space for women, for Afghan-American women. I, growing up, don't have any sisters. I was an only child for quite some time, but I did have a lot of cousins. And even though I was close to a lot of them, there was still that kind of like that disconnect, whether it was family politics or, whatever the case may have been, there was still a disconnect. So I've always wanted that sisterhood. And I definitely, feel that with this group of women, and hope to, create a space for other women to join us and, have that same sense of belonging. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Omaira, and I'm so happy to be here with everyone. I live in Southern California, in Orange County, and I have to say that I just actually moved out to Southern California and just literally moved out to Orange County about 6 months ago. I'm excited about sisterhood. I do have a brother and a sister. My sister doesn't live here in California, so sisterhood is even a bigger deal for me now moving out here. And this group of girls here is my first step at it. And I'm excited to meet everyone else and form more friendships and bonds.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fatima. I currently live in the Bay Area, California. I am the Engagement and Networking Chair for AAWC. Sisterhood is just such an important aspect, I think, to my life. Growing up, I had no sisters, but I had plenty of cousins that were, girls around my age, and just I always found myself seeking out friendship with other women that could I either could relate to or could learn from or feel inspired by. I think it's something that I've always felt so strongly about and really passionate. So I'm excited to share, and so great meeting all of you through this panel.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Rahimzada. I'm a sophomore in college, and a part of why I joined AAWC is because I think it really represents that ideal of sisterhood. And I have two older sisters. So for me, the idea of sisterhood has always been a very large influence in my life. And I found that sisterhood is really about being relentlessly unselfish and being an advocate for those people that you care about and the people that you want to lift up. And that's something that I want us to accomplish through AAWC. And I'm just happy to be part of this discussion tonight.
Cool, and thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. Once again, I'm Nasaman. As we can tell based off of what everyone has said, sisterhood has some way impacted all of our lives, regardless if you have sisters or you don't have sisters, but there's some type of connection or importance that each of us connect to. That being said, I want to put the question out there to everyone. What does sisterhood mean to you? And this could be a diverse set of answers, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
I'll go ahead and start. Yes, Aman. So to me, sisterhood is a bond that we share with those women who are close to us, people that we trust, those, and then eventually those turn into friendships where you accept each other, you don't judge each other, you don't point fingers at each other, and you engage and support one another during both good times and bad times. You're okay with other people's opinions and you embrace them. And then by doing all that, you work together to build and give back to the community and work as a team together to really accomplish anything. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I also think jumping off of Homairo's point about building with one another and engaging, I think so much of sisterhood to me means unity. I think that there's this huge component to it where we are just really seeking support with one another and finding ways to help one another. Sisterhood is just it's a special bond that, you know, I think us as women, I know myself as a woman, an Afghan-American woman, just navigating through this society, growing up in the Bay Area or wherever I am. I'm seeking that kind of unity, that sisterhood that I'm always looking for, and luckily have been able to find, but can also see that there's so much more room for improvement. And you know, being in AAWC, being a part of these kinds of efforts that promote sisterhood and that put this focus on the women in our community is it's just so great to see, and it's something that I want to keep happening. I want Afghan-American women to continuously find sisterhood in all the spaces they share, and since, you know, we're so spread apart, it's amazing to have this done, you know, online, and just to have that, you know, social engagement and connectedness despite, you know, the distance or lack of being close to one another.
I agree with everything that Fatima and Humaira said, but also sisterhood for me, it just kind of goes beyond, you know, the people that we have like a direct relationship with, like a direct connection to. Because there's women that we're going to come across where we don't really have anything that, you know, in common with, and that we're not going to invite in our, you know, in our circle or, you know, strike up friendships with. But those women still deserve our respect, and we should still wish them well and, you know, wish them success. And that's really what sisterhood means to me, is just wanting what you want for yourself, for, you know, for any other woman, regardless of if they're within your circle or not.
Yes, I love the way you summed that up, and that sisterhood can mean different things for different people, which I think we were able to showcase. And even with Omaira, Fatima, and you all giving your guys' responses of what sisterhood means to you, and that there is a level of respect when it comes to it, about being okay with the fact that that might mean something different for different women, which I think is totally okay. I know something for me when it comes to sisterhood is figuring out like what are things that I can do to help practice it. You know, like what does that even mean? How do you practice sisterhood? Does it mean, you know, constantly supporting women? Does it mean giving them the space to have their voices heard? Does it mean just being there for your friend when they need something, you know, and just, you know, being able to congregate together when that's necessary? I know for myself, especially in a work setting, if there's an opportunity to give a shout out to another woman that I'm working with, like I'll take that opportunity. We have like a shout out like Slack channel at work. And so we can shout out each other. So if I know that one of my female coworkers is doing something and maybe people aren't aware of it, like I'll try to showcase it. Another big one is like to advocate for other women in their professional space, which there's like a lot of articles that talk about this. So for example, if there's like an opportunity for someone to work on something and I happen to hear about it, and I know that like another female coworker really is looking for that opportunity, I'll try to do something where I can like connect the two, you know? So whether it's like advocating for them, it's like, oh, so-and-so has done a really good job in this, and I think should be fantastic, and you should connect with her and or whatnot. Or even like simple things of like, if someone needs something, whether it's like from one of my sisters to like a friend just wants someone to just listen to how their day went, or they want to just talk about their challenges for the day, being able to be that supporting person that's there, because I know I think part of sisterhood is also being like vulnerable, and that's not easy. And so if someone is being vulnerable to you, I think that's almost like, you know, that's not the case for everyone. So you have to honor it. And I think it's like also on you to be able to reciprocate that and be there for them if they showcase that. But I know like Michelle, you had a few thoughts about this too.
Yeah, for me, I think the practice of sisterhood is just directly a reflection of your mindset. If you really believe in that ideal of sisterhood, that it should apply to all of your behaviors. And I think that really comes through in all of your behaviors. Mm-hmm. So for me, I go to a women's college. So that ideal of sisterhood is really ingrained into the culture of my environment. And I see it in practice very regularly. And I think part of it is that inherent to having that shared identity as a woman, you kind of share in the trauma that comes with that identity. So in practice, it's having those open discussions about barriers, like instinctual barriers to establishing that camaraderie with other women. And also more personally, I was taught by my older sisters to always be an advocate for others and other women. So when it comes to like younger women in my life, I try to be a mentor for them, or even my peers, trying to provide resources to things that I have access to and not automatically assuming that other people are my competition. So if there is some opportunity, making my friends aware of that, even though that might mean ultimately that they are competing against me. And also just a smaller point, for me, I try to actively avoid using that language that it kind of is very easy to generalize or characterize women as, like to assume that other women might be catty because you don't know them, or any other kind of like generalization. Because I think tying back to what Somaya said, those women that you don't know, they're still part of that community and they still do deserve your respect.
I'm really glad that you brought up that point, Michelle, because I think that's what I wanted to touch on, is really paying attention to language and how we, you know, the words that we use to describe women. Because I know growing up, it was very easy for me to call, a girl or a teen, in my teenage years, or another woman, like unpleasant names. It was really easy, and it was okay. And, as an adult, and probably within maybe like more so like the last 5 years, I've just become much more aware of my own language and how I address women. And then also, and this is kind of crazy, but I have 2 boys, and how I teach them to view women and how they should, think of women, how they should treat women, is my kind of like contribution to the sisterhood, is, raising boys that will grow up to support, women and be advocates for women and just have respect. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, Samaya, I love the comment you just made about the language we use in terms of when referring to other women, because I think this is something I've become more conscious of the last like 3 or 4 years. For example, the biggest thing for me is like dress code and the way we view women at work who might not, like, maybe they're wearing something that in your perspective isn't necessarily like correct, or maybe in your mind you're like, well, that's not necessarily modest in a workspace or whatnot. And something I've been pushing myself to do, like literally the past few years, is like, why does the dress code exist in the first place? Like, who came up with the rules? I'm very passionate about this too. But dress code is something that's usually applied solely for women, not for men. Why is that? And how is that implemented? I work in a startup, so everyone can dress as however they want to. But even in that culture, like, you would still at times, even for myself, when I started working, like noticing that I would make like judgmental comments, or I would come up with think things in my head, like afterwards, I'm like, that's not okay. Like, how am I supposed to practice sisterhood in a workspace if I'm referring to my fellow sisters with these terms? So I definitely relate to that comment about the importance of language. That being said, kind of turning it into another direction, there are so many different women that are in our lives, whether it's our family lives or professional lives or our friends. But what can we do, or are some things that you guys do in your personal lives to support those in your sisterhood?
I'm going to jump in on this one here. For me, I definitely think that it's really important to want to be there for your sisters. And there's so many different ways that you can do that. Like, for me, I try to check in with my girlfriends that I know that are like having a tough time at work, and like giving them the space to vent. I mean, like, sometimes we all just get really frustrated about like work or personal lives or whatever the case may be. So being able to allow them the space to like just let your emotions out. Sometimes you need that. If it's like a coffee date, if it's like, getting dinner with one of your friends and just checking in with like a well-being check of like, hey, I know that the past couple months have been pretty hard for you. Let's hear about it. Like, I'm here for you as your friend. What do you need from me? What can I do to make it easier if there's anything at all? And I think what you said earlier about being vulnerable, I think that's so important. I think that it's one thing to like allow yourself to, or allow someone that space to like to vent or whatever it is, but like being vulnerable, it takes a lot of courage. I know that like I try to be as vulnerable as I can with my friends, because it like kind of creates this trust within each other, and like creates a better bond that you have, because you can relate. I mean, a lot of my girlfriends that are Afghan-American, I think our experiences are really unique. So if they're complaining to like their coworkers or like venting or whatever, they may not understand what it's like to try and juggle like a career and like family life and expectations. They may not fully understand what it's like to have the limitations that we do, sometimes being Afghan-American women, and trying to fight through those and overcome those obstacles and barriers that we have in our lives. So I think that like being able to not only provide that space for your sisters, but also practice vulnerability is really important, because this is like the only way that I've been able to get through my struggles, is being able to reach out to those sisters and saying, I need this space. I need to talk about this. And I know that you can help me through it, because I know that I can be vulnerable with you. And I know that you can help me through this process, because you understand me in a different level than some of my other peers may be able to.
I love how you say all that, because I was really going to say a lot of that stuff, Mina. So I was going to go into, being there for them, and really being quiet at times, just letting them vent, and just listening, because there's, sometimes people just need to say whatever they need to, and then just let it go. Or then there's other times where they may want to have the advice, but really the big thing I want to talk about is educate, to learn together, and showing the person that you care enough. And that could be being vulnerable, or it could be about talking about your past experiences and allowing them to listen and learn, and then grow from that. But just basically showing that you care enough and that you'll be there by their side. And it doesn't have to necessarily be your circle or the bond, but like what Samaya and Michelle said earlier, could be others as well outside of that, but showing that community of sisters or women that you're a carrier there to help them through whatever is happening.
To add on to that, Mina, what you were talking about space was something that just really resonated with me, allowing, to have to provide the space for others to share things about themselves. I think that is something that is probably one of the number one ways I'm able to support the women in my life, especially the Afghan-American women in my life. Just being very open and just this non-judgmental person, like, hey, I'm your friend. I'm here to listen to what you have to say, and I want you to express yourself in the ways you need to express yourself. I think that it's such a simple thing to do, but it is so valuable for everyone to have. I have women in my life who give me the space to be able to talk about whatever is in my mind, anything that I'm feeling. I'm just able to let it out without this fear of a person, looking down on me or questioning my actions or my feelings. And, it's something I always like to practice. And I've seen the positive that can come from this. I've just been able to be that source for a lot of people, and obviously a lot of people have been able to do that for me. That's how I learned to, be able to provide space. It's so important, and I just want to reemphasize that. And since we're all just learning from one another, I was able to pick up that ability from someone else, and hopefully someone else is able to do that for another person in our community or in their own communities. Space, I think, is just providing that space is super important.
Yeah, to go off of Fatima's point, like someone who's been friends with Fatima for a very long time, like I think she does an amazing job when it comes to providing space for her friends. I mean, I have definitely been on the other side and have been very grateful and understand what it's like to have a friend who just gives you that space to be vulnerable without any type of judgment associated with it. So I definitely agree. That being said, I guess kind of turning it on its head, what are some of the challenges that any of you guys have faced when it comes to sisterhood, whether it's expectations that are not met or a time you wanted someone to be there for you and they weren't, or just, roadblocks that we hit when it comes to sisterhood that can be hard to overcome?
I'm going to jump in on this one. So I think for me, because I didn't have sisters or like a strong female presence in my life from a really young age, it was really hard for me to go through some of the things that I went through growing up because I felt really isolated. And I think in my own upbringing, like I was really scared to share the struggles I was going through because my family told me, like, that's family. Any kind of like vulnerability, not that it's seen as a form of weakness, but you don't ever want anyone to know what's going on personally because it's just, you never know who's hearing it, you don't know what their intention is, and you don't know what they may say, what the backlash might be for it. So it was really hard because like I feel like a lot of the community I grew up in was predominantly Caucasian and Hispanic. My friends couldn't relate to like the struggles that I was going through because I was the only girl. I didn't have older sisters to give me advice. My parents had certain expectations of me. And things I was allowed to do, things I wasn't allowed to do, and my friends couldn't relate. So, and because I didn't have my female cousins that I grew up with were 10 years older than me, they came here when they were teenagers from Afghanistan. So like their experience growing up here is definitely different than what mine is. I was born and raised here. And then even my cousins after me, like they're 10 years younger than me, and I want to be able to be that support for them and that female presence for them. If they have questions, what it is, I mean, like their parents definitely won't understand being, born and raised in America and like having this Afghan-American women like identity. So it was definitely really hard. I really wish that I'd always wish one of my older brothers was a girl. My mom was just like, I don't know what I would have been done with them, but I think I really yearned for that guidance and that like vulnerability that I didn't have to like hide that myself and being able to be who I am and being able to like truly show that the struggles I was going through, and like having someone there to guide me through it. Because again, I feel like the experiences that we have as Afghan-American women is totally different than anyone else in you know, that we may have grown up with. Although like other people of color may have similar backgrounds in terms of what like expectations of like females in their family or anything might be, but I feel like our experience is especially unique. And then me being Pakhtun, I feel like that was a whole other like level of like barriers that I had to go through. And not having that like female guidance in my life was really a struggle. And so that's why having something like AAWC and creating this space and being able to relate to each other and realize that, hey, I also went through that when I was younger. Oh my gosh, like your parents thought that, so did mine. Oh my gosh, I like totally can relate to you on so many different levels. But when I was younger, I've been taught from a really young age not to let that out, not to let people see that side of you, because you can't show that vulnerability to anybody. So I think that it definitely hindered me from being able to get the advice and that guidance that I wanted, because I was too afraid of what the response may have been and what my parents have like raised me to believe. So I definitely think that not having that female presence in my life from a very young age has impacted the way that I view a lot of the struggles that I've been through. But definitely something that I'm working on now, and that's why I think that having a space like this is so important for me. Like I definitely have learned through this. I've definitely taken advantage of like having my girlfriends and my sisters here to get advice, to learn from them. So I definitely think it's really valuable.
Mina, I totally get where you're coming from. The things you're saying, like, you know, already, I have all brothers, no sisters. I come from a super Pashtun family too. It's so hard to do that. You grow up so much of your life. I think it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s where I was able to find like role models that were women that I could talk to about my like specific background and be able to relate to them. It's such a struggle. But I think, you know, like what has been really challenging is, which I think is applicable to a lot of different cultures, but, you know, obviously I'm Afghan-American, and within my culture, you know, it's just this guilt culture, this constant guilt and shame of things that you would be just like, you're living your life, you're doing the best you can, but you're always feeling guilty because, you know, you're not a good enough, you know, you're not a good enough daughter, you're not being a good sister, you're not supporting your mom in the way she needs to be supported. There's like familial duties that you need to do that, you know, that you aren't doing. And it's like, it doesn't go away. And it's something that you are always carrying until you're able to just like actually be really selfish about yourself and just require from the people who are making you feel guilty that, hey, I don't want to be made felt this way anymore, and actually I can make a choice and not feel guilty. But it's so hard. I think that is a huge challenge, just always feeling guilted or shamed in a way where like I'm not fulfilling certain expectations that an Afghan woman should have. This can be, you know, this could literally be anything. I mean, I didn't make the tea properly, or like I didn't get it, or I'm not cooking enough. Like I don't have I don't have enough Afghan dishes that I can cook on like if my mom randomly asked me, like I should be feeling guilty about these kinds of things, or, you know, I don't have the right type of job, or I don't have the right type of career. You know, just like anything, it's like automatically, you know, feel guilty about it. Like you have to, instead of just having a conversation about it, or let's get past this. It's something I've definitely had to learn to do. Like I've had to learn to tell people around me, like my Afghan family members, hey, this guilt culture that we're perpetuating, we need to stop it, because actually, you know, we're doing just fine and we want to be happy. And at the end of the day, if you see me happy, isn't that the goal? Oh God, such a huge challenge, but getting through it.
No, I can totally relate to everything you guys said. as far as the challenges, so like I think I had a really interesting like childhood. Although I was like pretty much the only child, my brother and I, we have 10 years difference between us. I did have a lot of female cousins close to my age who I was very close to. We grew up together. You know, some were a little bit further from me, who I'm still very close to. But there was still like this, like, you know, I think in every family probably deals with this. There's just like this, like, there's just fear of judgment, even though it's like family. I think sometimes we fear judgment from our family members more than, you know, people that we choose to have relationships with, like our friends. So there was always that, you know, in the back of my mind, where, you know, don't be 100% like open, or don't be 100%, you know, yourself, because you never know like what might happen, you know, this might. And then there's also like, especially in my generation, and I feel like now I see it in the younger generation, I don't know, it just my observation that it's getting better. But, you know, gossip was such a huge thing, part of growing up, and it's such a huge fear that, you know, one little thing could just, like if you were at school and you went to school with like other Afghans, if you said hi to a friend, you know, it just a guy who was just a friend, that somehow that would turn into, you know, oh my gosh, I saw so-and-so, you know, holding hands with a guy. So it's just like that constant fear. And like, you know, I think I'm just like at a point now where I really have gotten to a point, obviously, where I am in life, where I just don't care. And if I'm able to be vulnerable with someone, I'm going to be. And if they, you know, take that experience and make something negative out of it, then it's on them. You know, it doesn't take away anything from me or my life or my happiness. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, Samantha, because you brought so many great points as far as the whole, you know, you were being afraid of really having a bond or a sisterhood because of what people would say about you, or gossip, or reputation was huge when I was growing up. Don't do this or don't do that, because gosh forbid, you know, someone saying something about you behind your back when it's far from the truth. So it was really hard to trust anybody, because you were afraid that that person that you potentially said something to would go make it, you know, even bigger than what it really was. And so, or your mother said, oh, don't, you know, talk to so-and-so, because, you know, if you do, then you'll, just by talking or associating with that person, you would become a bad girl also. So it was just really hard. And like you said, now it's gotten better. But when I was growing up, it was just that reputation and associating with certain people and whatnot. It was just really hard to form that bond or friendship and have that sisterhood.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it earlier today when I was thinking about the topic, about how part of sisterhood includes like vulnerability, and we've been talking about that a lot. But if you want to be involved in some type of sisterhood, but you don't trust the people that are in that group, like how open can you be, right? How much can you get from that sisterhood if you feel like someone is gonna pass judgment, or someone's gonna tell your parents, right? Like that was like a really big fear of like, what if I open up in a certain way and something gets back to my parents? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be something really bad, but you just never know how it's like a game of telephone, right? By the time it gets to my parents, how is it eventually gonna get there? And you don't know, and the consequences seem so big that at times it just seems easier to potentially be like, well, you know, maybe I have this group that I'm going to be close with, but not necessarily this other group. So that being said, what, or if any differences have you guys seen within different sisterhoods within like your American friends versus like your Afghan-American community? Fatima or Mina, if one of you guys want to jump in, I know you guys wanted to respond.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to respond earlier to what you were talking about in terms of like the different groups that you're able to be vulnerable with. I've definitely have experienced this in the past, and I think it's really unfortunate that we come from such a like judgmental like culture. And I feel like I've definitely heard my mom tell me all the time, like, be careful what you do, what you say, what you wear, because like you don't want anyone to ruin your reputation, or we've worked so hard. And like that's definitely been something that's instilled, especially because I'm a girl. So like especially I hear it so much. My brothers, on the other hand, not, I mean, there is definitely an expectation for them to be mindful of the same things, but because we're women, I feel like that's just another added pressure that we have to deal with in our community, and it's so stressful. It is so stressful. I mean, like I I've always told my mom, I'm like, I don't understand why you care so much what these people say, why they have an opinion, like why would you even want to bother like continuing and like and having these like social friends, these or like participating in these social circles where you're so worried about them judging you for like, I don't know, what your scarf looked like, or like the fact that you wore the same outfit like maybe twice or something, or like, you know, just having the desire to have so much business in your life when it just doesn't affect them in any way. And that's been such a big struggle. And I think that our generation is definitely one to stop this repetitive cycle, because we kind of have an understanding of like, let them be. Their lives are their lives, and it's not something that concerns us in any way. So like let them have it, let them be as they are, and there's no need for us to like have that extra I don't know, like not to be concerned and be mindful of like how they choose to live their lives or anything like that. And I think that that's another struggle of like being able to relate to sisters in your community, because we're always just have this like voice in the back of our head of like, oh, okay, you can say these things to these people, but you can't say it to the other people, because of the vulnerability you're allowed to have, and being able to show yourself to one group but not fully be able to be yourself in another. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I think that obviously we all have layers of vulnerability that we like to show to our friends. But at the same time, I think that this is something that we in our generation can move to improve for the next one, and for ourselves as well. But like I think it's really important that we have these conversations. At least I definitely have this conversation with my mom about why it's so important to her, why this person who we haven't seen in like 4 years, you know, has to say about my career choice or something like that, or you know, the fact that I don't live at home. Like, why does it matter? Why do you care? So I think that that's something that even for her and her sisterhood, like our parents' generation, is something that they have had a struggle with. So definitely something that I hope to change for our generation, and also going forward, being able to have that vulnerability in all different groups of you know, whether they're Afghan-American women or like in our culture and out of our culture, being able to have that space and like being able to be yourself.
Mina, that was definitely something, yeah. Again, I relate to you so much on this. Yes, yes. You know, also just thinking on sisterhood and sisterhood within my Afghan-American community, or within the Afghan community, and sisterhood versus any other community in my context, it would be the American community. So much of my life, I've grown up thinking, you know, I'm good with having my community just not being specific to being Afghan. So I go to school, like I meet people from different backgrounds, and it honestly doesn't matter, because we can all connect on this, especially with women, we can all connect on similar issues, and we find similarities, obviously. But you know what's been really special for me within maybe the past 2 years is like reaching back and getting reacquainted with my Afghan community, and realizing that sisterhood at a general level, so vital, so important, especially with you know, the climate now, with so much going against women in society nowadays, in the news. And it's just you really need women to be supportive of one another. But there's been something so unique about finding sisterhood within the Afghan-American community, or just with Afghan women. You know, it's like I can talk to another Afghan woman and we can relate on so many things at such a deeper level because we come from the same, we share a similar history. We have a similar heritage. We share language, you know, we share languages. I grew up speaking, you know, Farsi and Pashto, and just being able to have those little quirks, have those jokes, know that our parents totally did the same things. I mean, me and you, Mina, will have the same jokes like said in Pashto to us when we were like growing up, like, oh my God, your mom said this to you. She said the same exact stuff to me. It's so reassuring, and so like, it's like just, it's so warm to have. And, you know, I want to constantly see that, you know, I want to be able for our community, because I don't think it's there to have this identity with us, that we have this sisterhood, we have a bond, and when we meet another Afghan woman, that we share this and we're open to sharing it. So, you know, I think when I'm comparing the two, like my American, like everybody's my, you know, every woman that I meet, I can like have similarities to, versus the Afghan women I meet. Obviously, like both are necessary and important to my life. But having that Afghan context, so important, and it definitely should be emphasized. I mean, why not? Like, you know, we have one another. We should be able to build on that.
Yeah, I totally, yeah, I get that. Like, so like the Afghan community versus what we're going to call the American community or non-Afghan, definitely. So like, I think, you know, with Afghans, with your cousins, whether it's intentional or unintentional, there's a level of like competition put, you know, onto us, like from our parents or from other family members. It just naturally happens. There's just like, you feel like, especially if your cousins at the close age, like one of my cousins were like, you know, and we're really close now, but growing up, it just always felt like, you know, we had to compete, even though we really didn't, but it was like this competition, which again, I don't think it was like an intentional thing. I just think that because we were so close in age that we got compared, and it's not, competition is the wrong word, but we were just always compared to one another. You know, she's like this, why can't you be more like her? Or she would hear it from her end, you know, Samaya's like this, why can't you? You know, now as adults, like we like see that, we, you know, think of that stuff and we laugh about it. But I think that kind of like hindered this sisterhood that we so desperately wanted. You know, and then like for me, like I really, in the Afghan community, honestly, like I really didn't feel that true sense of sisterhood until like you know, when I got married, and my husband has 2 sisters, and I'm so close to them, and I joke with him all the time. I tell him, you know, really the only reason our paths crossed was that so that I can be connected to your family and your sisters. Like it wasn't even about us. It was about my relationship with your sisters. And, you know, they're everything. They're my support system. You know, they've seen me go through some really hard times. I've seen them go through some stuff. And, you know, and so I always have a problem with people saying, oh, you're like my sister, because I feel like, well, am I your sister or am I not? You know, because like for your sister, you would probably, you know, you would like drop everything. So I think it's really important. Like when you tell somebody, oh, you're like my sister, really like live up to that and mean it. And they definitely are. Like there's been times where I've been going through something and I've called my sister-in-law at like 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, I need you. And she's been there for me, or they've both have been there for me. But as far as like the American community, I think there's a less of a fear of judgment. Like I have some really good friends who are non-Afghan. They actually, you know, I tend to like become, you know, I've always tended to become closer to women of color, or just because, I don't know, I've always like culturally connected with them more. But there's less of a fear of judgment, really. Like I feel like I can be more vulnerable. I can say anything, and there's no like shock, you know, from them. Like, oh, you know, Samaya did this or she said this. I've I felt like it was more accepting. But with like meeting all of you guys and just sharing these past few months with you, and just, you know, especially when we were all in person, like it gives me hope. And like Fatima was saying, it's just these like certain little like quirks that Afghans have, you know, like that we can only relate to each other, certain jokes or sayings that like our moms, you know, like I really, really enjoy that part of the culture. So I'm just so excited to, you know, be a part of this group and with all of you, and just excited to invite more women into this circle and really, you know, share this experience with them as well.
Yeah, so Maya, I really, really loved your point about living up to the expressing that someone is your sister and really meaning it and showing that through your actions. For me, I think for most of my life, I did believe that, oh, my video's off. I think for most of my life, I did think that there was this kind of inherent divide between the American and Afghan communities. American community was much less judgmental, and that it was easier to relate to other women within that community. But I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that just on a larger scale, as women, you're conditioned from a very young age to reject your female identity because it puts you at a disadvantage. So you never seek that fraternity with other women. And within the American community, you have that. Like, other women are seen as competition. You actively try to isolate yourself in certain situations. I think it's almost instinctual because of the way that the society that we're brought up in. And I think specific to the Afghan community, it's pronounced because we have such a common identity. I think the closer and closer you get to having the same identity, the more we want to parse out those differences and judge and hate one another simply for the sake of distinguishing ourselves and proving that we're not like other women, we're better, and rejecting again that female identity. You want to be better than other women. And specifically to the Afghan community, I think because of so many of those expectations are tied up in our culture, our religion, morals, and, you know, sense of family and reputation, because there is a sense of duty tied to all of those things, that feeds the cycle. And that's why we have that intergenerational hate of women that doesn't seem to fade, in my opinion. I think it simply evolved. And also to Yasman's point, and I think Fatima also brought this up, and Mina, all of you, that you can't really trust certain circles in the Afghan community. Because of that, you will never be vulnerable. And I think that's a really big hindrance to change and creating that unity.
Yeah, no, to that point, Masha, like, that is really tough. You know, that's really hard. And I think even after I left like AAC last year, like every part of my body wants to be like, yes, everything's fine now. I trust everything. But I think like we can all relate to it as women. Like, that's not the case. And I'm sure that I don't want to speak just for women. Like, I'm sure men feel the same way too. And that it takes so much out of you to be so vulnerable with other people. And I don't think it's a case that like, I think other people are evil. I just don't want to cause harm to like my parents, or I don't want to cause harm back to myself or my uncles, my aunts. Like, I don't know how big things can get, you know? So it's like, it's just easier and simpler sometimes to maybe just to not do that, you know? And I do think that is a hindrance or a negative to our community. You know, the fact that people still feel like, I think Fatima was saying how like we're not 100% there to feel like we have that community already set and that we can get there. But I do think through, you know, discussions like this, or through AAWC or even AAC or TSN or other outlets that are out there, we can slowly get to that place where hopefully one day as a community, we feel like we can be vulnerable to one another. Because I think, Samaya, you mentioned that at times it's easier to be vulnerable with your non-Afghan communities than your Afghan communities. And I agree 100%. Yeah, like none of you guys know my parents. None of you guys know, you know, like anyone related to me. So it's totally fine. It's okay. But I think it would be such like I pray for the day that we get to a point where that stigma isn't necessarily attached to it. So with that in mind, what do you know, I'll throw it out. Samaya, you can answer this question, but what do you think we could do to lift each other up in terms of our sisterhood when it comes to either like our personal lives, but also our professional lives?
Honestly, a big thing for me, whether it's like professionally or personal, is just coming from a place of empathy. Like professionally, say you're a supervisor, you're a manager, like you have to be a human before you're any other thing, you know, anything else. And just if you practice empathy, it really like positions you in a place to like make better decisions, you know, and how to react to certain things. Just everything, you know, everything in life, I think it just starts from a place of empathy, just learning to place yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think it's really easy to do it, but you know, people are so hesitant, you know, because I feel like you know, again, like our egos get in the way. It's just, so again, just like, you know, coming from a place of empathy, not letting your ego get in the way, and just truly wanting what you want for yourself and to your close friends, your family members, your daughters, your sisters, your cousins, for, you know, for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think, Michelle, you had a few thoughts about this too.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Somayael said. I think you need to come from a place of empathy in all of your interactions with other women. And I think it's really entering each interaction with women with that presumption of sisterhood and having that guide the interaction and your behavior towards other women. And I think that translates into like the kind of language you use when you're speaking about them and the things that you feel comfortable saying around them. And, you know, like furthermore, like professionally, I think making an effort to actively fill in the blank for opportunities and resources that might be helpful to specific people. Like if you find a certain opportunity for like a job or an internship, maybe you yourself are not interested in, or that you are, but also picking out another person that could potentially help. I think that really contributes to the idea of supporting one another and giving that help, even if help isn't asked for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that last point you made, Michelle, about constantly thinking about how this opportunity could potentially help someone else. You know, I think that's great. And going back to a comment that Fatima made earlier, and I think Mina, and I think at one point all of us had referred to it, but the biggest thing we can do is to create that space for other people to feel vulnerable. You know, I think a lot of times we've mentioned that we haven't felt that for ourselves at all times. And I think it goes back to what can we do? You know, what do we have the ability to do to make others feel like that space is for them? So whether that's for other women in our sisterhood or for the younger generation, like I have a few younger cousins, and I'm always thinking about like, well, what can I do to help them for this situation? You know, how can I give them opportunities or resources that maybe I didn't have, or that relationship that maybe I was striving for with like other people that I didn't have, but I could potentially give to them. I think would be really helpful too, because I think it's great for us to like discuss it and have these conversations. And I think like the harder question is like, how do we fix this and how do we move forward and help other people, whether it's the younger generation, like I said, or just even older than us, get to a point where they feel good in the space that they're in. So we have a few minutes left, so I just want to wrap it up really quick. So I'll throw it out to you guys, but if you had to describe sisterhood in one word, what would that be?
I think for me, it definitely is support is the first word that comes into mind.
For me, I want to say love, but I kept talking about trust, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say love, but trust as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I would describe sisterhood as like a symbiotic relationship, because I think it's intuitive to the way we instinctually want to act towards other women, but acts of sisterhood are really mutually beneficial, and that's why they're so important to practice.
I think a word that comes to mind is understanding. Just understanding one another and attempting to understand one another.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but sisterhood is empathy to me.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And if I had to describe it in one word, I think sisterhood means being resilient. I think as women, we are very resilient. And I think as Afghan women, we are especially resilient. And that is another conversation for another day that we can have. But that is it for our conversation today. Thank you to all of you guys for watching in and listening to our conversation. Thank you to the AAWC board for having this discussion as well and being vulnerable, putting ourselves out there. Hopefully we'll have more in the future, so we'll keep everyone updated. Look out for future events, and hopefully we'll see you guys all soon. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.
Bye. Bye.